So
Oh,
here's my question for you. There was a time crunch, right? I mean, when they got off the train, there was a time crunch to stop the bad guys, right?
I'm going to
So
stop you right there. Because I know where this is headed. There is always time for Bond to be Bond.
Soundstripe.
Episode of Blockbusters, a classic movie podcast where if you're like us and you miss the days of packed movie theaters and movie stores, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Caleb Suggs. Joining me are my co-host, Dakota Lowry.
what's up, everybody?
And Ernie Ferguson.
she always did enjoy a good squeeze.
And this week, we are doing our first James Bond movie and Dakota's first James Bond movie ever, right?
Yeah, sure is.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
That is crazy.
I understand the whole point of this podcast is you haven't watched a lot of old movies, but to have gone, you're 29 years old, to have gone, well, you're 28, you turned 29 Friday, right?
Yeah.
Happy pre-birthday, by the way. We'll just go ahead and
We're
get
good.
that now.
We're
We'll
good
do
at
the
that.
anti-Ryan Ferguson and
There you
and go before.
Thank you.
But 29 years old and you have not seen a James Bond movie. That's hard to wrap your brain around.
Well,
Yeah.
there's so many of them.
You never went to one to that was in the theater, because
No,
they come out like every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
No,
for one time-
we never did. Go ahead.
Space. I was like, say, they come. They at one point in time they were every 2 years coming out, and so that surprises me that you didn't go see see them.
And they're all pretty much standalone, so it's not like you have to have seen them all to go watch the new one.
Well, my dad's not a very big crowds person, and he doesn't really like the movies, and then it never really interested my mother or any of the people that I usually went to the movies with when I was in high school or even up through college or anything. So it just...
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just in the last few years with this. I mean, you and your wife go and see just about any movie that's slightly interesting at the movies.
Well, I mean, we're dinks, deal income, no kids, so we have that opportunity.
Didn't say it was a bad thing. I wish I could still go and see any movie that interests me. And I try to go see most of them, but there's some that I don't get to go see. But
what was the last James Bond villain that came out? Or
Villain?
James Bond movie that? Yeah,
No Time to
it was
Die, I think.
2021, I think,
Yeah.
was the last one, right?
Yeah, the last Daniel Craig one. I think it's called No Time to Die, I believe.
Yeah, No Time to Die.
They just announced the director for the newest one today.
I saw
Dennis Villeneuve.
Villanueva?
He's the guy that directed the Dune movies.
Okay, I saw a picture of him in the sand. That's what I figured it was.
The Dune movies and the newest Blade Runner, not the original Blade Runner.
So again, I mean, how you're announcing the director before the lead? That's kind of...
Well, it's I don't think. Well, it also came out that it's rumored that Aaron Pierre, I think is his name, is gonna be the new James Bond. He doesn't have much filmography, so but I don't know. I guess finding a new, fresh actor.
That's interesting.
But anyways, this
yeah,
week,
because it was Daniel Craig's last. That was his last one, and Next Time to Die. Yeah.
Yeah, and he, I think, kind of did that reluctantly. I think he didn't want to, but I think when they were, spoiler alert, going to kill him off, then that led him to do that, I guess.
I'm sure they threw a few bucks his way to entice him.
Surely not.
Well, anyways, this week we're doing not a modern James Bond movie, but we're doing 1995's GoldenEye. Obviously not the first James Bond movie, but it was my pick. And each generation has their James Bond. I grew up with Pierce Brosnan, as that was my James Bond. So that's why I went to GoldenEye.
It's very interesting, just to when because good lord, I think I might have seen all of them. Maybe not. There may be some that I haven't seen here or there, but it's very interesting if you make Sean Connery, who is the iconic James Bond, like your center. That is who you're basing everybody off of because he has that half campy mentality. Sometimes he can be serious, and then you go from that. Then you go to Roger Moore, because I'm not going to mention the guy who was in with Russia with Love because he not Russia with Love. I can't remember what. No, her Secret Service, Majesty Secret Service, but Roger Moore replaced him, and Roger Moore went as far kooky and zany, almost like Austin Powers, with his portrayal. Then you get Timothy Dalton, who is on the other side. That's where they tried to make it a little bit darker, a little bit more serious. When you get Pierce Brosnan to me is that in between Sean Connery and Roger Moore, and then Daniel Craig is the far on the other side past Timothy Dalton as far as dark and serious. So it's fascinating to me that you have this one figure that is played by many different actors, and they went a lot of different directions with it. And I think they tried to reel James Bond back in with Timothy Dalton with those two movies because it's a little bit more serious than James Moore. Because not James Moore. Roger Moore was really campy. I mean, really, really, really campy.
I would have thought we'd get a James Moore name drop
yeah, I know. Well,
in 2025.
If you know, you know. But this is fitting when I talk about campy, But then you had to swing the pendulum the other way with Timothy Dalton. But here with Pierce Brosnan, it reminded me a lot of Hudson Hawk because you have those cheesy one-liners that were there. It was a little bit more serious, but you have a TV actor again in Pierce Brosnan who, Remington Steele. I know I mentioned Moonlighting and Willis last week, but Pierce Brosnan was Remington Steele, which is almost like the same exact character as Bruce Willis, snarky, rich British guy who's a private detective type of thing, and so he brought that character to James Bond to me.
Yeah, and I think when I mentioned every generation has their Bond, and then when you have all these different people that play Bond that bring a different spin to it, you get tied into that's what you want it to be, and that's why when I watch the Daniel Craig movies, they're good movies and I can enjoy them, but to me that's not James Bond because I grew up with Pierce Brosnan. I grew up with the kind of campy, the one-liners. And the gadgets and everything where it's not super campy but it's also not super serious. It's definitely in that in between. And like you said, when you have all these different actors, that brings a different spin to it. And I'm interested to see what Dakota thinks because he's not seen any of them, so he doesn't really have any idea what James Bond's supposed to be like other than he's just a British spy.
So I've never seen any of the Daniel Craig ones, but I definitely remember when I looked at a picture of him, I'm like, oh yeah, that's James Bond. And every time because I guess was this Pierce Branson's or Brosnan's last. I correct.
This is his first. This was his. This is Brosnan's first. Yes.
Yes,
his last. Okay. This is so. This is a big deal because you had Timothy Dalton, and then the movie studios were in big financial. The MGM was hurting for money, and there was a lot of things going back and forth. They had a story ready for Timothy Dalton, but it took forever. So this was literally they would be going every 2 years since like 1967. Almost every 2 years there was a James Bond film. So this was 5 years apart between is it License to Kill with Timothy Dalton and GoldenEye, and so when they announced Pierce Brosnan, there was a lot of fanfare about it, about just announcing who was going to play Bond, just like there was with Daniel Craig too. It was a big deal when they made this announcement because here's the best thing. Do you see people's reaction for the Potter TV show. How people
What
have
is
this
up with y'all and y'all? Yeah, y'all called the
mispronouncing
Caleb
Harry
Suggs
Potty.
derangement today, mispronouncing everything.
But do you see how people are reacting to who's playing Snape or who's playing Dumbledore? That's pretty close to the reactions you get from people when there's a new Bond out. Like, if it truly is going to be Aaron Pierre and you have a black James Bond, oh, just wait. I can't believe James Bond's a black. You're going to have that left and right, and people are going to be like, well, that's cool, but I mean, James
I don't think
Bond
it'll be
is
as much
just,
uproar as it would be if they had gone the woman route, which was rumored.
I don't think that would. I don't think James Bond is. I don't think a Jane Bond would have worked. I guess you could have, but
But this was also a big changing of the guard for the entire James Bond franchise, because not only had it been 5 years, but then not only do they have a new Bond, but they replace M, and it's it's Judi Dench, who's the first female M in the show, and they replace Moneypenny and all these characters. The only character that you have from any of the original movies is Q. So there was a lot. It was a lot of change for and it really almost felt like a reboot for the franchise.
Yeah. I think going into this, I kind of thought, I thought more of Daniel Craig's portrayal of James Bond, even though I've never seen it. I kind of thought more of a serious. I thought this was more of a serious role.
This is not what James Bond's supposed to be like. It's supposed to be like this guy I've never seen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking this is more like, this was more along the lines of like Christian Bale's, like Batman type of thing. Like more of a serious, darker role, and not necessarily a dark role, but more of a serious role. I didn't really think of him as like a. I didn't really think of James Bond. I think, oh well, he's a playboy,
So here you go. In Batman terms, Daniel Craig is Robert Pattinson. That's how dark that Daniel Craig is. Timothy Dalton is probably more like Christian Bale. I would probably say Pierce Brosnan. I don't know. I can't think. I don't think there's not somebody from Pierce Brosnan, but who's the original Batman movie guy? Michael Keaton. That's probably Sean Connery there, and then Val Kilmer is Roger Moore.
I'm interested to know who George Clooney is.
Nobody. The one guy that did one movie. That's who it was. The guy who did her Secret Service and Her Majesty's Secret. Good Lord, I can't say that title right at all.
Yeah, but you mentioned it. I mean, I also think when you talk about Daniel Craig, you talked about you didn't know James Bond was a playboy, and it's a different time now. You still want James Bond to be a little bit of a playboy, but I mean, M says it in this one. He's very misogynistic, and that was what James Bond was in the 20th century. And she mentions he's a relic of the Cold War, and even this James Bond is really a relic these days. So I mean, you couldn't really these days. You have to be more modern. You can't have him to be as misogynistic as he was back in the 90s, or especially back in the 60s and 70s.
I'll tell you what, though, which is very weird, because you have Judi Dench and how they described her and how she described James Bond in this one. Go watch Skyfall, which is Judi Dench's last portrayal of M, and that's how she describes Ralph Fiennes, who will be the next. I think it's Ralph Fiennes. His last name is Fiennes. Who will be the next M? She calls him kind of a bureaucrat, just looking at all these different things, not getting your hands dirty. And then biggest complaint she has also is that everybody is trying to get rid of the double O's. So it's really weird to see how when she comes in as M, the things that they said about her and the things she was saying about the double O program at the very end, they were saying that, describing her like that, and they were attacking the double O programs too. So it was really interesting. But it also, I think, Judi Dench does
the movies follow. Not to generate, the movies kind of follow like the timeline. I mean, obviously James Bond never ages. He's basically the same age in all the movies. But the movies kind of, I mean, this. So another thing, this was the first movie since the fall of the Soviet Union. which is
Yeah.
obviously a big deal in the James Bond franchise because basically every villain in the original movies are all always Russian, always from the Soviet Union. So that's a big deal, and so the movies kind of follow the timeline of what's happening in real time. And as they get more modern, things change and stuff like that. Even though Bond himself technically never really ages.
Yeah, which again, this is another thing that pushes Judi Dench as him is in '92, Great Britain had its first female lead of MI6. So that was really kind of based. And again, if you're going to have a misogynist, sexist pig as James Bond, having a strong woman who will call that to him in his face is very necessary. And that's why that's the one thing I liked about the Daniel Craig James Bond was the relationship between him and James Bond. Yes, it was adversarial, but it was also mother sonish also, and it was really kind of, very interesting. But yeah, I mean, what you get from the Pierce Brosnan thing is you get your early this is James Bond thing. After the opening credits when he's driving the Aston Martin, he's sexually harassing the person who's checking his mental well-being. He gets the vodka martini shaken, not stirred. James Bond, like all that's like really, really, really early in the movie, and he hits it. And that's one thing I also liked what they did at the very beginning of the movie is, yes, it's a stunt double and all this kind of stuff in the bungee cord scene, but they hide Brosnan's face for the reveal. They don't just open him up in wide open spaces and you see his face. They cover his face. They have it behind shadows, and then they slowly reveal the eyes and they reveal a face. I like that because again, it is a character who changes actors, and that's one thing I did enjoy about how they kind of revealed Brosnan.
Well, GoldenEye is a 1995 spy film, the 17th in the James Bond series, produced by Eon Productions, and the first to star Pierce Brosnan as the fictional MI6 agent James Bond. Directed by Martin Campbell, it was the first in the series not to use any story elements from the works of novelist Ian Fleming. GoldenEye was also the first James Bond film not produced by Albert R. Broccoli, following his stepping down from Eon Productions and replacement by his daughter, Barbara Broccoli. What a last name. The story was conceived and written by Michael France with later corroboration by other writers. In the film, Bond fights to prevent rogue ex-MI6 agent 006 from using a satellite weapon against London to cause a global financial collapse. The film accumulated a worldwide gross of $356 million, considerably better than the entire 1980s Bond films, without taking inflation into account, to become the fourth highest grossing film of 1995 and the highest grossing James Bond film since Moonraker in 1979. It received positive reviews from critics, with Brosnan viewed as a worthy successor to Sean Connery's portrayal as Bond. It also received awarded nominations for Best Special Visual Effects and Best Sound from the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. It was followed by Tomorrow Never Dies in 1997. The Rotten Tomato score, Ernie, is
80, and popcorn is 83.
Yeah. And then you look at James Bond. I mean, it's so influential. Not just the who's going to play James Bond, but who's going to be the Bond villain. That's always a big deal. Who's going to be the Bond girl? That's a big deal. Who's going to have the song? What's the song going to be like? What's the car going to be like? And also, this movie inspired one of the most popular video games that has ever been released, and basically was the kickoff for an entire genre of video games, shooter games, that are massive today with Call of Duty and everything else that make billions of dollars. This all basically started with this video game. So James Bond as a franchise, and especially in this movie as well, is incredibly influential.
And I'll tell you something we didn't mention really. Sean Bean in this movie, I think every movie that he plays a bad guy in, he does a great job in. Which, granted, the only two that I've seen him in was National Treasure and then this one, but he did a great job in both of these. Just being that
other stuff.
Yeah, watching this has made me want to look up and see more of the other movies he's played in, just be able to see him be another villain.
So here is a fact about Sean Bean, and I don't know the number, but if you watch Sean Bean films, he dies a lot. I mean, like you think of Lord of the Rings, died. You think of not the House of Dragons, what is it, that HBO TV show, I don't remember, with the Targaryens and I don't remember, the dragons or whatever. He died in that.
No
He
idea.
dies, huh? He
I said
dies
no
in
idea.
all.
I have no idea what you're talking about. He doesn't die in National Treasure.
No, he didn't. That's one
He
of the few
doesn't
he
do
doesn't.
that.
But
He goes
there
to
is
jail
like,
in it though.
but there is. I mean, that is a thing that people talk about, is how Sean Bean dies in all these different movies that he's in. But like you said, I mean, this is a chance for the Bond girls. Almost is like a curse, which there's a lot of them that just kind of drift off into nothing. You know, there are some here or there that like Anna de Armas, that was in the last one, or one of the last ones.
She was a
known
pretty
star
bad-
before that.
Yeah, I mean,
But they usually get models again, which fits the James Bond motif. So or you get horrible actresses like Denise Richards that are in it. But then you get stuff like Femke Janssen. I thought she was awesome in this movie. I liked.
She's a freak,
I liked.
but she plays it very well.
Yeah, but that's like Grace Jones in one of the I think in Living Daylights, or one of the last Roger Moore one, which I don't remember what it was. Again, you have Christopher Walken and Grace Jones, so you have this Amazon woman and Christopher Walken together. You know, so just seeing all these the villains just kind of come together. You know, it's always interesting to see what they do with the villains. And again, unfortunately, the biggest complaint about Bonds is, again, chauvinistic, misogynist, and there's just a revolving door of women that will usually die because that's what happened. I mean, you can watch Goldfinger, and the girl got painted gold and was killed. You know, so. But that is part of the Bond lore.
Isn't that the movie that they based the Office episode, like the movie that Michael Scott filmed off of? What was the name of that movie that he made?
I didn't watch. I don't watch The Office, unfortunately. So that's
neither one of y'all do.
No, don't even come at us for that, Mister. This is my first James Bond movie that I've seen. So if you
I don't think the comedy of The Office is either mine or Ferg's.
It is Threat Level. It was called Threat Level Midnight. That's what it was.
So here you go. Get your pen out, Dakota, and I'm going to tell you the quintessential Bond movies to watch.
Here you go.
So I'll give you at least one for every Bond. All right, you've already seen GoldenEye, so you got Pierce Brosnan. Even I don't think that's the best. But Goldfinger and From Russia with Love, that's Sean Connery. So there's two right there for Sean Connery. All right. Roger Moore, The Spy Who Loved Me.
You're just dissing Moonraker. It's just perfect. It's perfection in Moonraker.
Yes.
Dissing right there.
Yes. Well, yeah, Moonraker's great. Which that made me chuckle whenever it said that it's GoldenEye hasn't made the most money since Moonraker, and that's what happened. Moonraker killed the other movies, but that's neither here nor there. So, License to Kill, Timothy Dalton, and then for Daniel Craig, I think there are two. I think it's Casino Royale and Skyfall.
I think Casino Royale's good, but I think it's overrated. I think people hype it up too much.
No, I like it because of the reboot and that's so. Here's the one difference I think with Daniel Craig is that his has a storyline that progresses through. Okay, so it's like MCU movies where you have your story, but there is kind of a story that goes throughout some of the movies, like Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace kind of go together, and then I think after that it's Spectre, and then Skyfall. So I think it kind of works together. So they do have some things that go along with it. I like it because I think you also get a more physical James Bond as opposed to like Roger Moore. Roger Moore was very campy. There wasn't going to be a lot of fisticuffs with Roger Moore. It was going to be more of the gadgets, the weird things and stuff like that. And just Roger Moore was probably the most charming of the James Bonds, in my opinion. But again, his movies just weren't pretty good. But then again, he was also James Bond in the late 70s and the early 80s. I mean, you're not going to get much out of that. So
did you even mention Tomorrow Never Dies for Brosnan? That's my favorite.
Is that the one with Michelle Yeoh?
I don't know. Is the Asian Waylon the
Asian
Bond girl? It's the one with the journalist who tries to start World War III.
Yeah,
I know that sounds like, when I say it like that sounds like the incredibly stupid plot line, but it's not as bad as it's not as stupid as it sounds.
Michelle Yeoh or something like that.
Michelle Yeoh, yeah. I'm not as big of a big of Pierce Brosnan fan as you are. We already watched GoldenEye, so I'm like, now the last two were horrible for Brosnan. They were especially with Christmas Jones. Because, never mind. I won't say that joke that's at the end of that movie, but.
Well, in 1986, MI6 agents James Bond and Alex Trevelyan infiltrate a clandestine Soviet chemicals weapons lab. After witnessing Alec being seemingly executed by the facility's commanding officer, Colonel Arkady Grigorovich Arumov, Bond destroys the site and escapes in a stolen aircraft. So, the James Bond movies, especially the Pierce Brosnan movies, just because those are the ones that I've seen a ton. All the ones from the 60s and 70s, I remember bits and pieces. But the James Bond movies of the 20th century pretty much follow a similar pattern. You have an opening fight sequence, that mission that'll kind of have something to do with the plot line later, but it's also kind of its separate thing. Then it'll go into the theme song, and then we'll meet Bond, and he'll meet the fake Bond girl, and then we see the real Bond girl, and it's always some villainous group that are trying to steal some kind of equipment and sell it for money or start a war or whatever. And James, it follows the same pattern, and we get that with this one here, with the opening scene being back in the Soviet Union, 1980. I forgot that it was 1986 at the start, because when it started, because it's been a little bit since I've seen GoldenEye, I was like, wait a minute, this is 95. The Soviet Union was 91. So, but I forgot. But it's still a great opening scene. You mentioned you don't get to see Pierce Brosnan's face right off. You get the cool scene with him jumping, and it's a pretty good opening scene. It's not my favorite opening scene out of all the Pierce Brosnan Bond movies, but it's still pretty good.
That is the typical James Bond. That is how every single one of them opens up, is that same, just like, okay, you have this little introductory story, credits with the main theme song, and then go. So that is the archetype of James Bond. And it's always, and that's usually where they do some of the crazier stuff, like, I think, one of the James, good Lord, one of the Roger Moore ones had them like skiing and had like biathletes. So, the biathletes are the guys that ski and shoot. We're chasing him and stuff like that. And he ends up like doing a ski jump and having a parachute come out, just crazy, weird stuff. And like, well, for Casino Royale, that was parkour. Everything was parkour, parkour. And that's what that was. So.
They changed it a little bit with the Daniel Craig. It's a little different, but it's still basically the same kind of pattern that they're following.
Yeah, it's a little more serious with him.
Yeah, dumb wrong. I think this movie come out the gate and kind of set the precedence that, like, you just have this guy who's going to do all these ridiculous things that are going to defy all laws of physics, especially with the jump. I don't know if y'all know how pendulums work, but you're not going to look at me and tell me that there's no way this guy doesn't splat right into this wall of this dam. And
again, you can't look at this as like, I mean, when you watch these movies,
like this is not Jason Bourne
or Mission Impossible, you're wanting to see them do stuff that would not. It's not possible.
And that's what I'm saying. You said they set that precedent pretty early in this, where it's just like, hey, like, I mean, the guy jumping off of or riding the motorcycle off of the cliff and skydiving towards the plane to climb in it. Yeah.
Right. So how in physics? I'm not a science guy, but using physics, how can he catch up to the plane?
He can't.
That's
So I'm not a science guy either. That's why I can buy it.
He's not.
I mean, so see, I buy
movies
that.
Are better when you just like history and English and don't like math and science. Movies are way better.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, he could reach it because he has less drag. But
in all the opening scenes, that wasn't the thing that I was going, huh? The most, because again, I understand I am watching a James Bond movie, so I will buy that the grappling hook saved him from splatting into the side of the dam. Fine, okay. Tom Cruise maybe in 2025 probably could have done that stunt for real in real life. Okay, but shooting one bullet and all these kegs of whatever that is fall onto all these guys and none of them dies. None of them gets curse. I mean, that should have been like people just going curse splat. Sean Bean at the very end of the movie when he falls off the satellite and lands, he didn't die then.
Yeah.
That should have been a big curse splat also.
But he would be dead.
Yeah.
I thought the biggest thing in the opening movie was how do you explain like how Sean Bean is still alive?
Didn't he get shot?
James Bond didn't see it. Bond didn't. He heard it, but he didn't see it.
All those soldiers are working with him, so they wouldn't be like, hey, that guy you just shot in the head isn't actually dead, or you didn't actually shoot him in the head, because they don't really explain it. Because
if James Bond doesn't see the death, it didn't happen.
Or he just was able to position himself where he wouldn't get shot. I mean, he was this was Saul before Saul came out. I think. I mean, he was pretending to be dead. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Well, 9 years later, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Bond attempts to prevent Xenia Onatop, a member of the Yanis crime syndicate, from stealing a Eurocopter Tiger attack helicopter during a military demonstration in Monte Carlo, but is unsuccessful. Returning to MI6 headquarters in London, Bond joins the MI6 staff, monitoring an incident in Severnia, Siberia, after the stolen helicopter turns up at a radar site there. An electromagnetic pulse blast suddenly hits the site, destroying it and several Russian fighter aircraft while knocking out some satellite systems in orbit.
Did this completely miss the whole race between
No, we're getting there. I was just about to talk about it. Give me a second. Give me time to cover.
He was asking about the Wikipedia part. And yes,
I was talking about Wikipedia.
Yeah, the Wikipedia part skips
guys,
it.
We've got to talk about Wikipedia. Can't mention every single little detail. It's a plot summary, not tell everything that's in the movie. Because we can talk about the race, but the race is not that important.
Well, no, I wasn't asking why it wasn't in there. I was asking if this was the paragraph that had happened in. That's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Because I wanted to talk about it, honestly.
Yeah, I was getting there.
I will get there.
I was trying. You didn't give me a chance. So as I was going to say, after the theme song, which, by the way, Ernie, what's the best James Bond theme song? He said he was going to ask this question, and then obviously Dakota's never seen these movies, and I'm like, I always skip the theme songs, so I don't remember any of them. So Ernie, you tell us what the best...
I'm probably going to say Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney.
Which is?
Live and Let Die, that's movie. It's in
okay.
It's either a Connery or a Roger Moore. But then also, after that, then probably Skyfall by Adele.
Skyfall is pretty good. I do know Skyfall. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, we disappointed Ernie. We couldn't have a more thorough discussion.
Well, that's not the most disappointing thing I've heard today. At church, I mentioned Master Splinter, and people were like, "Hell!" I was like, "Oh my goodness, I weep for the future." Y'all don't know the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'll tell you what, I'm screwing everything.
Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done.
Well, as Dakota said, after we do the theme song, we get the race. Are they in France? Is that where they're at? See, I get all
I thought it
confused
was
because I know
Monaco. I thought.
in Europe you can go through all you can go through different countries. It's like going through states here.
Look, just because they're riding bicycles does not automatically mean they're doing the Tour de France, okay?
Well, no,
They're either
when
in
they
the
steal,
Riviera or Monaco, I think.
when they steal the helicopter, that's in France. You see the French
Yeah.
flag waving.
That's
So
why.
that's
But
what.
Monaco is like is like it is bordering France if it's not part of France. So I mean,
But only James Bond could flirt with a driver in another car while almost killing the woman in his car, and then successfully get the girl in his car that he almost killed. Like that's only a thing James Bond can do.
who is supposed to be evaluating him because of course everybody has champagne chilling in their armrest.
It's not as bad.
Hey, that's
as,
a thing in the minivans now, okay? They have refrigerators in the middle console.
It's not as bad as the two movies after this when the doctor has to do his physical to release him for duty. I don't know if you remember that part, Ernie.
I don't. I remember that with Daniel Craig also, but
That evaluation is a little bit. At least she did an evaluation this time before she got to the fun part. But no, we get introduced to is it Femke Janssen? Is that how you know? Which
Yeah.
we've actually done a movie of hers already. She was in X-Men. Is this like her first movie? I don't remember.
Hold on, and I will tell you.
But she is introduced here, and as Ernie said before, she's great in this. She's one of the best characters in the whole movie.
and this is her normal. I mean, in this part of the movie, this is where she's normal when she's playing when they're playing cards. For the rest of the movie, she goes into something that people show you on Cinemax late at night. This is like just weird after that.
Yeah. This is her first like breakout role because the only thing she was in really before this was Lord of Illusions. And then like some TV movies and like cameos on TV. So this was her breakout role.
Well, she went all in for it. I will say it's a little bit different than what you expect from the traditional Bond pattern. Obviously, like I said, you always have the fake Bond girl and then the real Bond girl. But usually he still gets with the fake Bond girl too. So the fact that doesn't happen here was a little bit different than some other James Bond movies that we get.
And again, here you have she started off as a model also. So again, that is the typical James Bond girl of getting a model to come in and do these parts. But again, I don't know how tall she is, but she's a 5'11". So again, it makes for a good part for her to actually feel like a good foe, a good henchman, where you might think she could actually like beat somebody up.
God, she's scary. And
Yes.
because squeezing the life out of that dude, that does just not seem like a fun way to die. And also, like when they're in the Russian base or whatever you call it, the radar site, whatever, when she's killing them and she's like making those basically sex sounds as she's doing it, that is freaky. Right
she is
there.
loving every single measure. Somebody said that she didn't die. She died of too much O at the end of the movie. That's how that's how she really died. That's what I heard somebody say once. But so again, this beginning scene with the hotel and everything like that, you get the classic Aston Martin car that has all the little gadgets and stuff like that. That is a classic James Bond thing. Is that Aston Martin car? But again, they do it. If James Bond movies are nothing, they're good for product placement because then we get the BMW later on that they introduce. Which
I was actually reading something about that the BMW was supposed to be the tank chase, but they delivered it way too late and they wouldn't let them upgrade anything in it. So that's why we got the tank instead of the BMW. And even though at the X3, which I'll be honest, that 95 X3 looked really ahead of its time for the year that it was in, But yeah, that's the whole. We should have had more of the BMW in there, honestly.
And it got wasted too. All they did was drive it in Cuba and then give it to Joe Don Simpson character. I can't remember his name, but that was like, that's one of those things, especially on these times. The car's got to have some funky stuff about it, and that was kind of the disappointing part of it. But I guess if you're going to do a tank chase, you don't want the cars to be remembered. You want the tank to be remembered. And if you have some car doing some funky stuff all the time, well, then that may take away from the big scene of the tank, which I don't know.
Well, I don't think the tank was supposed to be in there. The tank was supposed to be the BMW, but BMW just delivered it to the set way too late for them to actually, use it in the film and be able to put gadgets and things like that into the BMW.
Well, the newly appointed M assigns Bond to investigate after it is determined that the blast came from a Soviet-era satellite armed with a nuclear electromagnetic pulse space-based weapon codenamed GoldenEye. Although Giannis is suspected of initiating the attack, Bond suspects that Yurimov, now a general, was involved because the weapon system required high-level military access. Traveling to St. Petersburg, Bond contacts CIA operative Jack Wade, who advises him to meet the former KGB agent-turned-gangster Valentin Zukovsky and have him arrange a meeting with Giannis. Escorted to the meeting by Onatop, Bond discovers that Giannis is led by Alec, who had faked his death. He learns that Alec seeks vengeance with his parents, Leon's Cossacks, who were betrayed by the British by being sent back to the Soviet Union after collaborating with the Axis powers during World War II. Man, we're talking about some word salad of some names.
You're skipping, words. You're not even skipping names here.
Look, it is what it is. If you guys would like to do this job, I fully.
You have right at it, buddy.
Would be okay. But, to go back, I did like, and we talked about this earlier, but to kind of re-hit on it, I did like the meeting with Bond and M because, as we said, this is a new M, and not only that, but it's the first female M. So I like having just the talk, and you just get all these things. I mean, they really are pushing it that it's the different type of a leader, and I really liked the subtle hint where he's like, your predecessor used to keep cognac and in the or whatever the alcohol is, I don't know alcohol, in the upper drawer, and she's like, well, I prefer bourbon. And then they talk, and she accuses of him being a dinosaur, and he accuses her of not willing to do what it takes. So but they go through all this, and you have differing views, but at the same time she cares about him, she doesn't want him to go die. And he's going to do what she wants. It's a good little mix there.
And what I also like is how, again, the James Bond franchise is not afraid to pull characters from different James Bond movies. Again, Q's the best, is not the only example, but is the best example that Q was Q for all the James Bonds, until he retired during one of the movies for Brosnan. But like Wade,
didn't he die not long after that too?
Yeah, it was like almost immediately after that.
Actually, I think that did that movie, the last movie that he's in, that he retires in, don't they dedicate that movie to him? Because I think he died like before it was released, or maybe it was the one after that. I don't know.
No, it's probably that one. But then you have like Jack Wade. That character, played by Joe Don Simpson, was Joe Don Baker. Excuse me, Joe Don Baker. He was in the Timothy Dalton movie beforehand. So again, he crossed Dalton and Brosnan. Then you have, again, Judi Dench going through Brosnan and Daniel Craig. Zukov is going to be in multiple. I think he's in either the second to last or the last
he's
Brosnan
in The World
film.
Is Not Enough, which is the second to last Brosnan.
So again, I like that when you're able to bring characters back, and even like the different money pennies. You still have money pennies. So money pennies treated like Bond, where you have different money pennies, and different bonds, but it's still the same quote unquote person. I like how they do that. That, like, okay, Money Penny, to me, maybe that's not her real name. Maybe that's just her spy name. Just like James Bond. Maybe that's not, even though for Daniel Craig, that's not the truth. But for maybe this is just the 007's moniker is James Bond, even though it could be Dakota or Ernie or Caleb. But whenever we jump into 007, we are James Bond. That's our name. That's our alias. So I do like how they kind of did that.
I always enjoy the scenes with Q. I love the gadgets. That's one of my favorite things about James Bond. And again, I've mentioned it. One of the things that I don't, even though they're good movies, I don't like about the Daniel Craig is they kind of went away from the gadgets a little bit. I love the fun gadgets, and I always love the scenes with Q where they're going through them and he's showing them what they do. And James is kind of like a child. He's not playing with the stuff and being witty. And I always love it when he's like, "Please bring this stuff back," and then it always gets destroyed. It happens in every Bond movie. It's played out, but it makes me laugh every time.
That's my lunch.
He's like, "Please bring this car back," and and you're like, "Oh, that car's gonna be destroyed."
Yeah.
Like,
which when he died, they tried to kind of do it with John Cleese when he replaced him as Q. I'm glad you're not going to get.
But it didn't hit the same.
No, and so if you're not going to be able to replace the original Q with that kind of banter, then I don't have a problem with what they did.
I can live with that. I understand that.
Because I mean, how do you replace a guy that was in that many Bonds and had that comedic timing and just had that just the great way he portrayed Q was just like he comes out in a wheelchair with his leg and a cast and it's a missile launcher, and also if you are going to play Bond seriously, then you can't have Q like that, which I would need to go back and watch the Timothy Dalton films and see how Q was in those movies also.
Yeah, and that's the problem that I hate about having not watched a lot of these is none of these characters. I'll be honest with you, a lot of like Q's mentioned quite often throughout the film. Even later on in the film when Alec brings it back up to James, that he's just like, oh, how's Q doing, or how's the American guy, how's he doing? And they mention these people, and I'm sitting here trying to remember who in the world they were because they were only in the movie for such a short time.
Yeah,
and if you haven't watched all the franchise,
I was gonna text you and be like, "Look, these are mostly standalone movies, but you have these characters that are kind of in every movie. They're not, I would say, major characters in every movie, but I don't want to say minor characters either. But they're important, but not at the same time. I mean, they're just, M's the leader of MI6. Q is makes the gadgets. Moneypenny is the secretary / I don't know what you'd call her. But
yeah, I mean, I kind of picked up all the roles, but it's just I was just
later on in the movie, be like, hey, look, these are the characters that are in movie. This is what they do, and I forgot to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at the time that they were in the film, like it made sense who they were and everything. I did not realize, I guess, the significance of their characters at the time period that they were in. And even like later on, like I said, when they mentioned a lot of these characters, they just, I had no idea who they were. So I will, if anybody hasn't seen these, I would suggest, I guess, knowing who all of the characters are before going into it.
Real quickly before we go on, man, we're already getting pretty late. Talk about this must be a James Bond episode, but I did want to mention I always love when I watch this movie, the whole Leanne's Cossacks things, because it's just like a little piece of real history that you can go back and learn about. That's pretty interesting. So I always enjoy that because I forget about it every time unless I'm watching this movie, and then I remember and I'm like, oh, let me go read about that again. So that's always a cool piece of history to pick up on.
Yeah, I like how again, that's the one good thing about this storyline is the Cold War, the post Cold War setting is just a fascinating setting altogether, and that's, unfortunately the Living Daylights, I mean, it probably doesn't hit y'all as much, but again, one of the things is smuggling somebody from East Berlin to West Berlin, which again means nothing to y'all. But I can remember there being a West Berlin and an East Berlin and a West Germany and an East Germany. That was very memorable to me.
I will say that one of the things that stood out to me in this was the way that they portrayed. Like I still love the fact that even though it's a British film, that they're still like the Soviet Union are the bad guys, like in every typical American movie that you have, it's either the Germans or the Russians.
Well, I mean, in the 20th century, the Soviet Union or Russia was the bad guys to basically everybody in the
Yeah,
Western civilization. I mean, it wasn't just America, but I mean, like Britain too.
yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I would love to know just the sheer number of movies that have been made where either the Soviet Union or Russia, which is obviously the same thing, but where those guys are the bad guys. I mean,
Yeah.
it has to be a mind-boggling number.
But
It was also go ahead.
but if you look at the movies that piggyback that bookcase, GoldenEye is the one before the last Timothy Dalton one was a drug dealer, and the one after this is a media mogul. So again, it's not they didn't necessarily like have to lean on it. Again,
No.
Caleb said it earlier. This is the first one since the Cold War, since the Berlin Wall fell. So it made sense to be able to lean in this, because I don't think the original script was this. The original script, it was Asian, was an Asian bad guy, and again they did a lot of rewriting. So that's kind of the whole electronic device or whatever shooting down. It didn't have anything to do with the Soviet Union. They had kind of like a rich, typical Bond villain wanted to take over the world, and he just happens to be Asian. So again, I think did an incredibly smart move by channeling the end of the Cold War and post Cold War world by doing that, because then you're able to take in, whose side, the post Soviet Union, post Russia, whose side are you on? What is your who is your allegiance to? Then you have Bean's character, who again, like James Bond said, you're using 50 years worth of an excuse just to be a common thief type of thing. So again, I think it was a good time to do that with it for this movie, was to tie into that. Plus, you don't want to make any of the Chinese or mad, because that's a lot of people that watch movies, and that's why some movies have been changed, because they don't want to affect that market.
Well, Bond is sedated and trapped in the Stolen Tiger alongside programmer Natalia Siminoff, a survivor of the Cervania attack. After escaping the helicopter before it explodes, the pair are taken into custody and interrogated by Russian Minister of Defense Dmitry Mishkin. Natalia affirms Oromov's involvement in the use of GoldenEye, and that fellow programmer Boris Grishenko survived along with her and is now working for Giannis and operating a second GoldenEye satellite. Before Mishkin can act on the information, Oromov kills him and captures Natalia. Commandeering a T-55 tank, Bond pursues Oromov to a missile train used by Giannis. He kills him and escapes the train with Natalia before it explodes. Y'all, I am struggling today. I gotta ask this question. Look, I know it's a movie and we got to do something where the heroes can escape, because obviously it's the movie, but man, does it ever really make sense that the villains always put them in some elaborate trap and just leave them there instead of just shooting them? Like, if you really think this guy is going to foil your plan, why would you not just shoot him when you like? It's like,
and then there's this obvious big red button that says eject right beside his head that he can easily headbutt. Like,
I don't know. Tiger helicopter. I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea about it.
Maybe they do have. I mean, I'm assuming the eject button in anything would be big so you can see it. But
But I mean, it's like you'd assume it's on the dash somewhere, not right by the dude's head, where you can see it that they're strapping to it.
He also headbutted it to start the engine too. I mean, I was like, oh, okay, wonk wonk, But yeah, that's one time he should have been killed. The other time he should have been killed was in the train. Another time he should have been killed was whenever Anna Top came down from the helicopter before she went and died. He was knocked out. Just shoot him. Shoot him.
So many. Look, so you know how many movies would end prematurely if the villain just shot. Just shot him.
If he prematurely shot, huh? Yeah. Okay. So the good follow-up movie to this, Dakota, for you, go watch Austin Powers. Go watch Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery. After you've seen this Bond movie, go watch that with Mike Myers, because they talk about an elaborate plan, like with sharks with freaking lasers, and stuff and things like that. And Seth Green character's like, why don't you shoot him? We can do it together, like father and son. We just shoot him, No, I want an elaborate plan where I talk forever and he slowly gets away. So if you want to see something that's making fun of all these tropes that are in the James Bond movies, go watch Austin Powers, because it
Shoot, I don't even think it's a James Bond trope. It's just a villain trope.
No, you're talking about a British character that's a spy that talking about shagging everybody. That's my bag, baby. It is ripping off that and Flint. I think I can't remember what the rest of the movie, but there's a character named Flint too, in like Flint, that it's kind of a rip off also. So yeah.
Well, didn't they also kind of show in here that all double O's are, misogynistic, whatever's, because even on the train, like Alec is sitting there and he's like, hey, so me and James shared everything. And
so I guess that's just the orphans that they go after, sexual miscreants that they want to go after. That's who we want. Those guys that don't care about anything. So, they can just hook up with anybody and just leave them behind and shoot them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is when we also get the tank chase scene, which I always love, because look, car chases in action movies, they are what they are. But this one's different. One, obviously it's a tank, so that makes it different. Instead of just cars, it's a tank. But you also have, instead of the villain chasing the hero, you have the hero chasing the villain, and the villain's trying to get away. So it's pretty fun there. But again, just watching the tank go through, I don't know if that's actually
drifting it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's serious Tokyo drift, St. Petersburg drift with the tank going on there. That was pretty cool.
And I've seen this movie multiple times, but I don't remember every little piece. So like when they turn down that alley, I'm like, okay, how's he gonna get it? And then he's just boom.
He just blows through the alley.
Yeah.
Straight in there. Oh goodness.
Which and I was disappointed at first, because I was like, oh man, this is the movie that the tank's not in. Then when I saw him escaping, I'm like, oh, this is the tank scene. I'm like, newsflash, this is my favorite scene. Even though it's completely ridiculous and completely not going to happen, but yeah, I like it because again, the tank blows through everything and then is Swiss cheesed by the train later on. But I like the scene because one thing I want to see from James Bond, just like the bungee cord scene, it's something new that you really hadn't seen before, and you've seen typical car chases, but here you have a tank chasing somebody, which again, the bad guy, the bad Russian guy, has time to pull his flask out and take a hit of his alcohol.
He took several hits, buddy. He was drunk by the time he got on that train. Okay.
Why didn't they kill the girl either? Why did they? Why did they need the girl? That's why I didn't understand why they just go back. If she were still in Siberia, and she was in there, they would have killed her. So why all of a sudden do you hold on to her? That's one of so these are some of the things that made me go, GoldenEye, and just that little things like that. I'm not one of those that's going to go over all the details of the movie with a fine tooth comb and go, oh, this isn't believable, because, well, it's a James Bond movie, but I'm still like, okay, just kill her already. It just makes sense.
Yeah, I was trying to remember what she was doing. I was trying to
start my next paragraph, Dakota. Like, who are you to talk? This is not an Ernie's thing.
He still wants to talk about the Russian bath scene that we didn't have when James should have been killed then too.
The which one?
The Russian bath scene or the pool scene where we finally have our first. I was going to say mano-a-mano fight, but it may be Lego fight between James Bond and Onatop.
Oh man,
I forgot that was in there.
You're counting down the minutes whenever this is over, aren't you?
Who, me?
No, okay. Caleb's rolling his eyes over and over again. I don't blame him.
What? No, what are you talking about? No, I mean it's an interesting scene. That's for dang sure.
It
Well, at least the
sure
Canadian
is.
guy died with a smile on his face. I mean, when he fell out of the closet, he was just had that Batman Joker serum smile on his face
He was enjoying it up until the bitter
up
end.
until he died. Which I guess if there's going to be a way to go out, I guess it's better than falling hundreds of feet and going splat and then having a radar or satellite fall on you.
Dakota, I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
I'll be honest, I've done forgot now. I've done forgot.
We've jumped the
That's
shark
how we do
several
it.
times.
That's how we do it. Well, Bond and Natalia travel to Cuba after Boris is traced to a location within the island's jungles. While flying over the area, the pair is shot down. Onatop is lowered from a helicopter and attacks them, but Bond destroys the helicopter and snaps her spinal column. The pair uncover a hidden base beneath a large artificial lake, concealing a satellite dish. Bond is captured while setting explosive and learns from Alec that he intends to steal money from the Bank of England and use GoldenEye to erase its financial records and conceal the theft. Bond surmises that Alec intends for the electromagnetic pulse to trigger a global financial meltdown and social collapse, causing the United Kingdom to re-enter the Stone Age.
So here's my question for you. There was a time crunch, right? I mean, when they got off the train, there was a time crunch to stop the bad guys, right? So
I'm going to stop you right there. Because I know where this is headed. There is always time for Bond to be Bond. So,
yeah, but I mean, be Bond on the plane
matter.
out there, not. I mean, but there was before Bond was bonding, he was just sitting on the beach, just looking out. He wasn't even bonding. He was just.
Oh, he was about to be bonding.
Yeah, I know, but again,
that was the key to his bonding.
No, his brooding. No, he's James Bond. He doesn't need to brood.
And then I always look. One of my favorite things about this movie is leading up to it. We get like this relationship, like they mean so much to each other. Like they didn't just meet for the first time a day ago.
Yeah.
Like
true movie romance.
And then after they've been bonding, she's like, "When you said that,
I didn't mean anything to you.
I didn't mean anything to you. You didn't really mean it, did you?" And he's probably like, "Yeah, I didn't mean it. I met you yesterday," but he's like, "No, of course not, honey.
I mean, he said,
"Call the bluff.
It's called a bluff. I'm not going to screw this up if we survive this. I'm going to get it again because I'm Bond, James Bond."
I mean. Let's be honest here. Do you really think Bond could be completely honest and be like, "Look, I met you a day ago. You really don't mean that much to me," and still close the deal later? I think it's James Bond.
Yes, 100% he could.
So I mean, he can do whatever the heck he wants.
So okay, so I was kind of disappointed with Onatop's death because that's one of the problems I have with some of the henchmen who are like really bad mamma jammas. We get this death where I'm like, I don't know. I guess her getting crushed or however they said snapped her spinal cord. I don't know how we could tell. That's why it was just weird. But I wanted her death to be a little bit more. But again, that's taking up time because again, she like the peripheral characters. I liked her. I liked the Russian mobster that had Minnie Driver singing in the background. I liked him too. I liked the American. I like Wade.
That woman, her singing was.
Oh,
awful.
what did Brosnan say?
So
Strangling a cat or something like that.
Yeah. And he like doesn't understand what she means, and he looks and he realizes he's like, "That's my mistress," and she tries to shoot him. Yeah, I don't. I get it. It probably could have been a cooler death, but it is what it is. At least we get to see her be a freaking lunatic one more time.
Yes.
Before, and at least they gave her maybe they could have been better, but at least they gave her a significant death. Not just something stupid.
I'll tell you the one thing that I had issue with her whole fight was when she comes down out of the helicopter. James Bond just sits there and watches her drop out of the helicopter for like a good 10 seconds before she kicks him in the chest.
Bond has a weakness for beautiful women.
He had a concussion. That's why he could barely see what he was seeing. That's why all she had to do was just sit there. I mean,
mine
there's other ways he could have
Ernie's
killed him.
reasons for why he did that are both very plausible.
I'll give you the concussion because I didn't think of that one, but I was just like, dude, like,
remember,
step to the left.
The plane just got shot down and went through a bunch of different trees.
Yeah, sure.
You know, so
did.
I mean, he might have been cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. You know, he might have been lucky for him. He might have been seeing like 3 of her. You know, so but you know, shoot the one in the middle.
They didn't have a. I don't think he had a gun, did he?
Who knows? James Bond always has a gun.
He sleeps with a gun under his pillow. Hey man, that's one thing they don't talk about in this movie is the fact that he always sleeps with a gun under his pillow. But don't worry, we get it a lot in the very next movie we get. So don't worry, I will be picking that movie at some point. So Natalia Hacks.
Yeah, I saw. All right. No, I actually saw that Natalia Hacks. It never reminded me. I understand that you have to portray hacking somehow in a movie or whatever.
Straight. You're talking about the next paragraph before I've even read it.
Well, no, I was going back to when she was on the train or whatever. Hey, you have at it, buddy. I'm going backwards in time, okay?
Beep, beep.
But like when they were on the train and she's does her thing, and I understand like it's a movie, you know, you have to portray hacking somehow or whatever, okay? But the Spock, what in the world?
It's just tracking. They were tracking the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I understood what they were doing, but it was just
it was like a virus. Like that's another word for virus, or I don't know.
I think it was essentially like them just obtaining an IP address.
So this is where you can be creative in 1995 because
today you can't really
the internet really isn't. It was a new thing, you know. So you could have a lot of liberties with it because, again, I mean, it was brand new to people. So I mean, that's why you can get away with that kind of being campy, like having that weird, like Alan Cummings' weird avatar he had on the computer, Boris's, excuse me, you know, because again, people we don't know any different at that time.
Yeah, because I mean, you even see that in Jurassic Park too, when the guy hacks the security system, whatever. I thought it was funny that all the hacking scenes, but specifically the spot where they're tracing the call back through the landline through the ocean to figure out where they are, and you're going to tell me that's not going to take 20 hours,
especially for a second-rate programmer.
Natalia hacks into the satellite, reprograms it to initiate atmospheric re-entry and thus destroy itself. She is then captured as well. While trying to undo her programming, Boris nervously presses on a pin confiscated from Bond, activating a grenade concealed in the pin by Q Branch. Bond knocks the pin from Boris's hand into a puddle of chemicals that were spilled during an earlier firefight, causing a chemical explosion that allows Bond and Natalia to escape. First, did he click it 3 times? Maybe I just missed it. He's doing it so fast.
He kept on doing it in 2s. It was like 2, 4, 6, but that should have turned it off. I don't know. I tried to count so many times that I gave up on it. My bigger thing was, okay, when they got Bond, did they not hear the bomb beeping? And did they not smell? No, it was still beeping. When they walked him away, when they got him, when he gave up, and they walked away, it was still beeping, you know. But then also, do you not smell the chemicals? Or I guess they're like chemicals that don't smell. I mean, pink chemicals don't smell. You know, they are odor free because we don't want to mess with anybody's allergies with our chemicals. You know, and then why do they have chemicals for? It's an electrical place. I mean, both places had chemicals at the very beginning of the movie and the end of the movie. Sean,
isn't it a chemical plant though?
I have no idea.
Wasn't that I thought it was specifically a chemical plant that they had went to for whatever reason.
I guess that makes sense then.
But
I did enjoy. Obviously, Alec is a an ex-MI6 agent himself, so seeing him understand that Bond has these gadgets on him and knowing that was a cool part. That something they could have easily skipped over, but I'm glad they put that in there.
Yeah, the comparison of the two watches. Oh, the newer model. I did like that too, which I thought was very interesting because you saw whenever Boris was clicking the pin, you saw how intently that Bond was looking at it, and and I kept on waiting for Alec to kind of figure it out, but again, it's hard to tell what Bond was staring at. Was he just staring at Boris's attempt? He didn't know, and so there was that was a good tension, I thought, for the movie. I didn't know what Alec was nervous about. Was it nervous about Boris and that's what he sees James, or is there something with the pen? I liked that was a good piece in that part for me.
Yeah, I wanted one of the watches. That's one of the takeaways is that I saw from this was the watch with the laser that comes out of it and shoots, and then the remote detonator for the bombs and everything. It was a really cool.
You don't want the belt with a grappling hook?
Hey, it's only made for one person. Yeah, two people. Who knows? It's like he knew he was going to save two people later on.
His gadgets in the later Brosnan films are better. But of course, none of them beat the jetpack from Moonraker or whatever. Was it Moonraker? No, it wasn't Moonraker.
I don't know what Moonraker. I can't remember what it was. It was one of the Connery ones.
Yeah, nothing beats the jetpack. Well,
I did see earlier where somebody had online the bombs or whatever that he had on the tanks that they had made fridge magnets that looked like that. It was pretty cool.
Thunderball.
To prevent Boris from regaining control of the satellite, Bond sabotages the dish's antenna by jamming its gears. Alec tries to intercept him, and the ensuing fight between the two culminates in Alec being dangled below the antenna. Bond then drops him into the bottom of the dish. The GoldenEye satellite is subsequently destroyed. Natalia soon rescues Bond in a commandeer helicopter moments before the antenna malfunctions and explodes, destroying the base. The debris falls onto Alec, crushing him to death, and Boris dies from an explosion caused by a ruptured liquid nitrogen canister. After landing in a meadow, Bond and Natalia prepare to enjoy some solitude together, but are interrupted by the arrival of Wade and a team of U.S. Marines who escort them to Guantanamo Bay Naval Base.
So this is the first time we truly get Brosnan going hand-to-hand fighting. And I didn't think it was that bad. And the problem with the fighting scene was the sound effects. I thought it took the manufactured sound effects that they had, I thought took away from, the two dudes diving down stairwells and things of that. I liked the action. But again, to me, that special effect really kind of took away from the fighting, which I forgot to mention some of the special effects earlier on in the movie, but I'll say that for later.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much enjoyed seeing him and Alec kind of go at it. It's always fun seeing them kind of. You see this in a lot of Bond movies, fighting on not traditional, like what you would. I mean, it's just very awkward fighting on what they're fighting on, but it makes it because you have to account for that scenery into it. So that makes it for pretty fun. And you see this in a lot of Bond films with different unique settings that you have, fights or battles or whatever on. So it's fun too. Again, him falling to his. Not to his death, but in real life, I mean, that's it's like, okay, yeah, that dude.
To his internal injuries.
Well, that dude's dead, but I mean, we got to give him the dramatic send off. So, and then you get Bond and Natalia in the meadow. Like, I guess they're going to go bonding right there. But
well, that's another James Bond trope too, is at the end of movies, he usually literally gets the girl. And sometimes they are found out in awkward positions, and sometimes they just and nobody sees anything. So I'm just trying to figure out why all those Marines were there but didn't help out. And again, someone stated in another podcast about why are that many Marines like right next to each other? All it took is some like ATV to run over and you kill about 30 of them.
They are not officially there, so until they're officially needed, they're not going to officially intervene.
By the way, those 3 helicopters came down really fast. Also, when he whistled for all the Marines to stand up, The Marines stood up out of with their ghillie suits, and three helicopters came down like just like that. It was
speaking of
like
helicopters,
amazing.
she couldn't. That the one she commandeered, which commandeered is her pointing a gun at the pilot. They couldn't have made it a little bit easier for him to just jump into the helicopter and not have to hang on to the.
Yeah, but I mean, how close can the helicopter get without the blades?
The helicopter got closer than it should have gotten too, with all the guide wires that were on there too. But Bond's eternally strong. I mean, it didn't matter that he fell down those ladders, and had to hold himself on.
Had his hand stomped on a couple times.
Yeah, then was holding on to Alex's leg for a while before he let him go. So, but it is James Bond. Reality. Get out of here.
I'm gonna tell you, Boris's death was satisfying with him standing up yelling that I'm invincible, then immediately getting the froze to death from the liquid nitrogen. It was I laughed pretty hard. Yeah, I mean him standing there with the icicles hanging off of him, just with a pure look of shock on his face, is pretty funny. I loved that.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the movie. Guys, anything to add before we go on to the rankings?
I do have a love for the practical effects that they did, even though some of them looked worse than the Star Wars effects as far as the miniatures. But I do like when they try to do that instead of depending on just computer graphics. So I appreciate that. Oh, favorite scene.
Suggs, what was? Yeah, I was about to say, what was your favorite scene, Suggs?
I don't know. Maybe the tank scene. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about it. What doesn't stand out to me?
And I'll tell you what stands out to me. And I know I talked about it earlier and I kind of downplayed it. But him jumping off the cliff and getting into the airplane, it was pretty cool. I'm not dumb wrong. I'm like, not likely to happen. But I'm sitting here thinking, like, in a controlled setting, that's one of those things that every guy would be like, it's like one of those things that every guy's like, I could land a plane if I had to. Yeah. And it's one of those things that you're like, I could jump off a cliff and save the plane like that.
Again, in the James Bond world where anything can happen.
That's pretty cool. That thought never crossed my mind.
Well, man, no, I'm not saying that I would do it. I'm not saying I would do it, but like given the opportunity in a safe environment where you're not going to die, I'd try it. Why not?
Okay, Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could give you that opportunity just to see if you really do it.
I don't know. I did jump out of an airplane, so that's not that. Trying to jump into the airplane is not that far fetched. Okay.
All right. Well, time to move on to the rankings. Unless you guys have anything else you want to add, real quick.
No.
Okay. All right. I guess since it was my movie, I will go first. I mean, it's a James Bond movie. When you watch a James Bond movie, you're getting what you're getting. I mean, we went through all the basic, template that basically every James Bond movie uses, and this one hits everything to a T. The plot is simple, but it's not stupid, so it's enjoyable. It's great action. It is what it is. I think. Look, is this a A+ movie? No, but it's a lot of fun and it's enjoyable. And like I said, Pierce Brosnan is my favorite Bond, so I love all of his movies, even though I know a couple of them are not well received, but this is usually the one that is the most well received out of the ones he did, even though it's not my favorite, but I still enjoy it a lot. And I'll give it 8.5.
Go ahead, Ferg.
Again, I have a lot of time with Bond movies. I love Bond movies. I love the suspension of reality. I like, I just like watching them and being a part of them, watching them. To me, GoldenEye it's an average James Bond movie. This to me is almost on par with Hudson Hawk. I think it's a little bit better than Hudson Hawk. I think it's a little bit of better storyline, but that's kind of that campy. It's an enjoyment. I didn't like paying the rental fee that I had to pay for it. It's not one of those that I love to do that for. So for me in GoldenEye, I have a 7.5.
My goodness, I hope that that $2 didn't break the bank for you, Ernie.
It was over $3. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I had to pay like a little over $5 on Amazon Prime to print this or something.
I don't know. I paid it was $2.14 off
I don't know.
Amazon Prime.
I have Amazon
How
Prime. It was $3 and like 99 to $4.49. Anyways, go Dakota before we.
Mine was like $4.39. Why was mine so much more expensive than y'all's?
Because Caleb like steals cable from people.
And I rented it. That's the thing that gets on my nerves is I rented the movie today too. Like I watched it earlier today. So why does it? Anyways.
Now
moving past that,
the rankings going to go
past
down.
That, yeah. Amazon Prime ranking is going down for sure.
It says it was $4.39 to rent it originally, but there was a promotion that cut it down, and it was $2.31.
What was the promotion?
What was the promotion? Why was the promotion going on at lunchtime this morning?
Give your ranking now. Give your ranking now. Hammer GoldenEye because of that.
Maybe you just don't have the right subscription.
Okay. Anyways, there's one subscription. There's a subscription with ads and one without ads. Anyways,
We're obviously not sponsored by Amazon Prime, so go ahead.
Obviously not. We would love it if you did, though.
I don't have any issue with Amazon Prime.
Anyways, so obviously, as Suggs mentioned, this is my first James Bond movie. I've wanted to get into watching the movie beforehand, and I've never been able to. So I'm glad that I kind of got into that. I did not realize that James Bond was as, I guess, campy as it is. Especially with this actor that played it. I did enjoy it, though. It's one of those, just kind of ridiculous movies. And I really can see the impact that it's made on, like, spy films over the years. And it's kind of led to, some spinoffs like, the Kingsman series and, even some American-based, spy films. And so I really enjoy it and really like it. Overall, I enjoyed this movie. Yeah, there's some things that are absurd in it, but that didn't stop me from enjoying it and just, having, just laughing at it and enjoying the action going on before me. So I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10.
All right, an 8.5, an 8, and a 7.5. That averages out to an 8. Ernie, where does that put us on our rankings list?
That ties us at 28 with Twister. We have the exact same rankings for Twister as we do for this. The three of us do. So that is below X-Men and Bull Durham, but above Lost Boys, Trading Places, and a Bond villain that would not let Bond get away in New Jack City with Nino Brown. Nino Brown would have killed Bond. He wouldn't have sat there and talked to him.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure Nino Brown would have definitely killed Bond. All right, so that an 8. That you said it was 28 on our rankings list.
Tied for 28, yes.
Tied for 28. And if you'd like to see that full rankings list, you can go to our website, podpage.com/classicblockbusters. That's podpage.com/classicblockbusters. We have our full rankings on there. Our episodes, we have our individual scores that we give and some other stuff. So you can go in there and find all that. You can go on Facebook and find us Blockbusters, a classic movie podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter at, or X, as I guess technically what it's called, at BlockbusterPod1. Streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. We appreciate everybody that's been listening and has continued to listen. And next week will be our 50th episode.
Wow.
Hard to believe we made it 50 episodes, but here we are. And Dakota is his pick. So what will be our special 50th episode?
So as y'all know, I like doing. I think a little bit about
you
what I do.
You actually put some thought into it, whereas
themes. He likes themes.
I do. I really like themes.
Let's pick a movie.
So, with this being the 50th episode, I decided to go with a movie that is 50 years old and actually came out in June, 50 years ago, and it is the movie Jaws.
Nice.
Jaws, yes. I think it came out
June 20th, 1975.
Yeah, so last Friday. So almost right there. Just will be a couple weeks off, but That should be pretty fun. We should we should do like a 50th party and go find a swimming pool and watch it in the swimming pool. That's what we should do.
Hey, I
Hey,
don't
it
have a
is
problem
too
watching
it
a
is too
swimming
hot
pool.
to sit outside.
Swimming pool's fine. Don't take me to the beach.
Oh, yeah, I'm not getting in the ocean watching it, but I'll get in the swimming pool and watch it.
Well,
Plus, these legs don't see the sun anyways. I'll blind everybody.
All right, so Jaws, that'll be what we're doing next week. Again, we appreciate everybody that's listened to us and allowed us to get to 50 episodes. Guys, anything to add before we close this up?
Thank you for the support we have.
He's already done his Nino Brown crap, so now he can't pull it at the end.
Yeah.
So all right, we'll see you guys next week for number 50.
We'll see you at the movie.